Well, hi, friends. I'm so excited to be able to share with you today, and we are continuing in our Psalm series. We've got to hear from a few different people on different Psalms and just really look into the book of Psalms and what that means for us as believers and how we can use what we learn in the Psalms to put language to how we come to God in our worship, in our lamenting, in our thanksgiving, in our praise. And so today we're going to look at Psalm 100, which is a psalm of worship. And I'm excited to dive into this today. So let's go ahead and read that as we get started. Start with Psalm 100, verse 1. It says, "Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with gladness. Come before him with joyful songs. Know that the Lord is God. It is he who made us, and we are his. We are his people, the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him and praise his name. For the Lord is good, and his love endures forever. His faithfulness continues through all generations." So what a beautiful psalm this is. And we're going to break it up into 3 different parts. But before we do that, let's look at what our main idea is for today. And that is God is glorified in a joyful people who are eager to know him and make him known. And in verse 1 and 2, we see this place of worship, of rejoicing, where it's saying, "Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth." Shout for joy. Saying the volume is loud, it's proclaiming, it's abundant. Noise, there's joyful noise. Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. And that call to rejoice and worship is not just here where we are or right what's in front of us. It's actually to the world, to all the earth. Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. That is global. And our spirit of worship, and as we see in verse 2, it says, "Worship the Lord with gladness. Come before him with joyful songs." We see a lot of joy and gladness in here. It's saying that spirit of worship is joyful. Are you joyful when we come to the Lord in our worship and praise? In verse 1, it's saying, "Shout for joy to the Lord." In verse 2, it's saying, "Worship the Lord with gladness and sing joyful songs. Come before him with joyful songs." So take a moment and think, does this passage describe me? God means for his people to be marked by joy. So when I'm coming to worship and at those times, am I shouting for joy to the Lord? Am I worshiping the Lord with gladness? Am I coming before him with joyful songs? Am I rejoicing in who he is and his faithfulness? And as we continue to go on, we see that scope of worship is all. It's total. It's with everything that we are. And we are to do it with all that we are. We're to do it in everything that we do in our lives, every single day. We are to do it all the time. And as we continue to go through and go into our second section we saw that rejoicing, that worshiping the Lord, we go down into verses 3 and 4, where it really breaks down, the psalmist is really breaking down knowing the Lord. And we see in verse 3, it says, "Know that the Lord is God. It is he who made us, and we are his. We are his people, the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him and praise his name." We see and know that the Lord, he is God. He made us. Right there it says, "Know that the Lord is God. It is he who made us." And it doesn't just stop there. So this psalm isn't just restating that obvious truth that many of us know and that we can say very quickly, that God made the world and everything and everyone in it. The psalmist goes on to clarify that God claimed a people for himself. God is calling us his. We are his. And we see that God is in control. We've seen this in our passages that we've been studying on the weekends. We see this in just different psalms. We see this all throughout the Bible, that we are God's and that he is in control. He sets the dates for the rise and fall of every kingdom. He has that planned. He is sovereign. He's in control. And think about that truth in relation to your life of God is in control and he knows all that is going to happen to you. He has planned that. He goes before you and establishes that. So think about that in your life in relation to your struggles, your anxious thoughts. God is the maker of heaven and earth, and he is in control. We are to trust him, and we are to cast our cares on him. We learned a few weeks back of in Psalm 46 of being still and knowing that he is God. So we are to do that as well in knowing who God is. And we see as we continue reading in that God is in authority. Everything that the psalm lists in here is saying that it's under God's authority. The gates are his. In verse 4, enter his gates with thanksgiving. Come to him with a thankful heart. The courts are his. Enter his courts with praise. Come before him in worship. The songs are his. Give thanks to him and praise his name. And we see that the earth is his. We see that we are his. Everything is under God's authority, showing us that he is in control over all. So as we gather each week, whether that's online or if you're joining us in person as well, as we gather each week, we are inviting one another to know God better and better. And the better that we know him and that we learn and pull this knowledge out of the word, the more that we're going to love him and have that need to get to know him more as we love him. And the more that we love him, the more that we trust him. The more that we trust him, the more that we are going to obey him. And we see that in just showing that we are to be faithful in learning and knowing and have that eagerness to know God more. And that takes us into this third section of the psalm of spreading the word. In verse 5, we see in this psalm, we see those three parts of worshiping. We are to be a people praising God for all that he's done, rejoicing with a joyful noise, and growing in verses 3 and 4. We are to grow, a people growing in the knowledge of God, being eager to know God more and more. And finally, in verse 5, in this psalm, it kind of wraps it up with this mission. We should be a people taking the gospel to all people. And so let's read that verse. Verse 5 says, "For the Lord is good and his love endures forever. His faithfulness continues through all generations." And we know that it's not just all generations, meaning all people, it's also all nations. So all nations and all people, it's an all-encompassing all that is stated here. In verse 1, we see, "Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earths." The psalmist is showing us that he's talking about all the earth. The psalm ends with God's faithfulness being seen by generation after generation. We are to take the gospel to every nation. We're called to make his name known in the world and to all generations. So as we're reading this, let's go ahead and just read this psalm one more time, as now that we've kind of picked it apart and taken pieces from each section of worship, of knowing the Lord, of spreading the gospel and making his name known. Let's read this psalm again, starting in verse 1. "Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with gladness. Come before him with joyful songs. Know that the Lord is God. It is he who made us, and we are his. We are his people, the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him and praise his name. For the Lord is good, and his love endures forever. His faithfulness continues through all generations." So as we're kind of wrapping up here, let's go back to our main idea. Our main idea today is God is glorified in a joyful people who are eager to know him and make him known. So my question for you is, are you an eager person who wants to know him more and make him known? Are you joyful in your praise and worship of him and all that he's done for you and promises to continue to do? So now what? When we take this psalm and we've learned from it, so now what are we to do? So I have a question for you. When you think of your life, is there an area in those three different sections that we walked through that maybe you struggle with, or one that is a little bit harder for you? And that's okay if it's more than one, if it's all of them, if it's one of them. Just take a moment to really think about that. Examine your life and your heart of, Is it difficult for me to come to the Lord in joyful songs? Is it difficult for me to rejoice in all that the Lord has done and say that He is good? Is everything around me chaotic and it's just hard for me to see that God is truly good? Is it that rejoicing? Is it knowing the Lord? Am I having difficulty knowing the Lord and I don't have that eagerness to know the Lord more? Well, what do I need to do? How can I know the Lord more and dive in and just learn about His character and be able to say that He is good, He's in control, He's faithful and loving, and He cares about me? Or is what comes difficult to me spreading the word? Do I get shy in that command of making His name known to all people and all generations? Does that come as a struggle to me? Do I not know where those opportunities are to share? What is it for you? It's going to be different for every single one of us. So take a moment this week. What can you do to dive in and really grow that area of your life? Whether it's the worship, whether it's your knowledge of God and who He is and all that He has done for us, or whether it's that following that call that God has placed on your life to spread the gospel and make His name known. So take a moment and think about that and really focus on that this week. That is my challenge for you. Let's go ahead and pray. God, I thank You for Your word and Your truth that You have given us. God, I also thank You that You are an all-knowing God, that You know where each and every one of us is at. You know the struggles of our heart. You know what comes easy to us, what is difficult for us. And I thank You that You are a God who meets us where we're at. And so I pray that each one of us, as we take that real examination of our heart and seeing where we struggle and where we might need Your help. God, I pray that You would meet us in those moments, whether that is encouraging us and giving us that boldness to worship You with a joyful noise, giving us Your joy. God, or is it that we struggle to know who You are, that we don't see You around us? God, I pray that You would draw near to us in those moments. And if the hard part is spreading Your name and proclaiming Your name to all the world, God, I pray that You would give us that courage and boldness to do that. I pray that we would have an eagerness to know You more and an eagerness and a desire for all people to proclaim Your name. God, I pray all of this in Your Son's name. Amen. All right, guys, it was so nice to be able to share with you today, and I'm excited for us to continue this series as we continue going through a few more Psalms. See you next time.